This old guy DIY video has to do with the steps I'm taking to help a hot chick I know get a pool ready for sale. So she had a property with this kayak pool. It's 16 by 32 swimming area with a 2-foot deck on each side, and then it has an 8-foot deck here on the south end of the pool. And she sold this thing to a guy that lives about 5 hours away. That guy is coming with 3 helpers and a 40-foot flatbed trailer, and the goal is to figure out how to disassemble this thing so he can take it home in a few big pieces rather than have the 200 pieces you'll see when you watch a kayak pool assembly video. So I saw many on YouTube showing how to assemble these things. I didn't see any that showed how to take it apart. Over the last 2 days I shot the video that follows so you can see how we plan to take that 16-foot far wall, and then we'll take this front wall as a 16-foot section, and if things go well, those side pieces that are 32 feet long will stay intact also when they go on his trailer. So it looks like a pretty straightforward operation. In the course of selling this thing, she had one potential buyer who was a professional who said he runs all over the country buying kayak pools, since today they cost about $40,000 for the pool and another 40 grand to get them installed. Anyway, this other guy, the professional, buys kayak pools, disassembles them, sells them, and then goes and installs them someplace else. And when he was talking about buying this and coming to get it, he indicated that with one helper, he could have a kayak pool like this disassembled in 4 hours on the trailer and headed to the road. So with that knowledge, I thought there has to be a way to take this apart in big sections rather than removing every screw and nut. So what follows is my attempt to take this apart in less than 20 pieces, and based on what I saw in the last 2 days, I'm encouraged. I think it'll be a nice clean transaction, and with 4 men working, I suspect we'll be done in 6 hours with his trailer ready to hit the road. So thank you for watching. My goal here is to remove this thing in as few pieces as possible. So based on what I've seen so far, I think I can have 20 pieces when I'm done with this. So what I did first is came into the corner, I pulled these out on both sides. So this post is hanging loose. You can see this will now go with this back section. And then there was a retainer here for the winter cover. I removed the one screw there. And then down under here, there were a total of 5 screws that were holding these pieces that run long ways into the sideways chunks. So I pulled those little 5 screws out, and then on each of the beams there were 2 bolts on top and 1 bolt on the bottom. So I've removed all the bolts on the top. My lovely assistant's coming over. She's going to hold one end. I'm going to remove the bolts on the bottom, and if my plan is a good one, we'll grab this whole back section that's 20 feet wide. All of these support arms and the fencing, we will be able to just step away from the pool and lay it in the lawn. We'll know here in a moment. So the plan was pretty good. We had 2 of these little end pieces that came with the railing and the frame because I had failed to take out a small screw right over here. So we had one on each end, but the back fence is off the pool, and these pieces will just slide out one at a time. So it's going to be real easy, and it looks like the plan is coming together. After removing the aluminum pieces that ran here along the end, I just reached in and started to remove the liner from the track so you can see everything down there. And my great plan is to get to these bolts. So I have the bolt heads here, I have access to the nuts on the bottom, and I'm going to remove this piece after I get these things out. My plan is to take this back wall that's 16 feet long as one piece. And to make that happen, I have to remove the bolts and nuts here. Bolts on top and the nuts are down where my hand is. And then here in the corner, we have 3 bolts here and 3 more on that side. So when I remove those things, I should be able to take this entire wall as one panel. And the guy who bought this pool has a trailer that's over 32 feet long, so I suspect we can lay this whole panel intact on the trailer and save him a bunch of work when it's time to reinstall. In addition, we can leave this support right there in place. Unless it's difficult for him to load, if he wants to pull it off, we'll pull it off. But based on what I've seen here so far, this is going to be a nice clean transaction, and I believe we can get this thing on his trailer in 20 pieces or less. To get access to the bolt head, I just pulled this landscape fabric back, grabbed a shovel, dug in here, and now I can put a box end wrench on the inside, put the impact on this outside, and that joint will come apart really easily. I'm looking forward to pulling this back wall off. If this thing works as I expect, this is going to be about a 4-hour job to disassemble this pool. This morning I'm attempting to remove these corner brackets. You can see the bolts are all rusted and rounded off over 15 or 20 years. So I have my Milwaukee 1/2-inch driver. I'm going to go in from below and see if these things had shoulders so I can hit them from below when they come loose, and if not, looks like it'll be a job for the grinder. On the top of this bolt, I just scored it a few times with the grinder. Now I'll hit it with a hammer and chisel, and I should be able to get it out of there. I got those big bolts out, but you can see the one I chopped the head off of, and this is the other one that's just corroded over time. So going forward, I'm just going to cut these things off with the grinder and suggest to the new owner that he buys new bolts, because it's really not worth the time it took. It was about 1 hour for me to get these 5 bolts, 2 on top and 3 on the bottom. So now I just have 2 more bolts in the middle that are the straps that go at 45s. I'll get these same 5 bolts off of the other side, and I should be able to pull out this whole 16-foot end section as one piece. I was able to get this end of the cross member off in one piece, and when digging the hole to get access to the underside, you just have to dig out a long enough trough so that the wrench can lay down in there. And the 15/16 open ends I have are about 6 inches longer than this crescent wrench, so that's why I'm using the crescent. To summarize, in an hour this morning, I got those 3 bolts out, the 2 bolts up here, 1 hole, 2 hole, the spot for the cross member, the bolt for the second cross member, and the 2 bolts that go through the support on top. So it's about 10:30. Sun is shining, already 90 degrees. I'm done for today. I'll come back this evening and get these 3 bolts here, and then hopefully pull this whole end panel off. I'll keep you posted. It's 8 p.m. and the shade is back, so I'm back to work on this pool disassembly. So the plan right now is to remove the mending plate that goes right here, and then I'm going to take off these 4 braces, which should allow me to remove this section of decking, which will then give me access to the other piece of this L bracket. And then when I can get the 2 bolts out of here, I should be able to pick this up, which will then allow me to pick up the end of this entire 16-foot panel. We'll see if this plan comes together. Now the mending plate was right here, so I removed that, and then to make it so this whole fencing section would come off, I went up on top. It's just little sheet metal screws that go through here that hold the fence section in. So I removed 1 section of fence. You can see this is where the mending plate was, with the help of my lovely assistant. After removing all the bolts that went down here and up here, we just grabbed this thing where the fence had been here. We pulled it back. It's kind of like wiggling a loose tooth out on a little kid, and it came out nicely. So now I'll just remove these interlocking aluminum pieces and I'll stack them over here, and that will give me access to the other side of the L bracket here, and that's all I hope to get done tonight. Take the bolts off that end of the L bracket, and then I should be able to lift up this end of the end panel. We'll see. The top of these 5/8 diameter bolts are pretty corroded, so it looks like grinder time. We're back at it, and I learned a few things this morning. So when you do pull this bracket off, I cut the bolts out of here this morning, and then there was still something holding it together. So when I came to the inside corner, right up here, there was one self-tapping screw that required a 5/32 head to remove. And when I took that thing out, the entire corner here separated. And because of the weight of the steel here and the racking and the steel here, these two corners pulled out away from each other. So my theory of removing the 4 bolts up here on top, 3 bolts down there on the bottom, the edge of the 45 strap, the edge of the 45 strap on the other end, right down there, the 3 bolts there, and the 4 bolts up here. The theory that this whole end would then come off has proven to be true. So the other key, if you're going to do this job, I screwed around on the other side for hours trying to remove these 3 bolts because they've been in there so long. So last night I hit these nuts with PB Blaster, and the key tool I found is a 15/16 socket on a 16-inch bar, because with that socket I was able to dig the dirt out from beneath, seat the socket firmly, and let it just drive into the dirt over here. So it was ground that was resisting the impactor. And I've taken out a lot of nuts and bolts with this Milwaukee M18 1/2-inch driver. And prior to today, the toughest thing I had was a front wheel bearing nut on a 2000 Chevy Suburban with about 250,000 miles on it. But this thing was grunting and giving it all it had to remove these bolts today. So all I have left to prove my theory is to pull off one more section of rail over here. I'm going to come to this mending plate, put a 7/16 open end on the back side of it, 7/16 socket on this side. I'm going to take that mending plate off, remove these 4 arms, take that section off, and then I'll be able to remove the end. And once I do that and prove my theory, the rest of the disassembly is going to be the responsibility of the buyer, who's driving about 5 hours to get to the hot chick's house in a couple of days. And when you remove this mending plate, the sides want to fall away. So after I saw my theory was good, I put the mending plate back, and I just put one of the old bolts in here to hold the thing, so I'm holding this corner together while I work on the other side. Then when it's time to actually remove this end plate, I'm going to run a tow strap from this side over to the other side of the pool and just use that ratchet strap to hold the sides up while I remove the end. While removing this thing, I found a few wasp nests. I suggest you take a look underneath before you start pulling it apart if you're doing this in the summertime. I learned when taking these top bolts out, now these two happen to be the best looking of any of those I removed, but when you're up here, and although they may look like they're rusty and crap, my first inclination was to take the grinder and cut these off and drive them through. But if you can just go to the bottom with the impact gun, the rust actually may seize it to this top plate so you can get the nut off. So in this case, there was plenty of area here to purchase with the socket. So I put the socket on top, the Milwaukee impact on the bottom, and the nuts are off quickly. Now I'm just going to pop this plate up. I put the strap across to keep the sides from walking out, but we're going to test my theory. When I pop this plate up, this whole end piece should be loose. And if it is, I'm just going to put it back where it is and wait for the new owner to come with his crew of help. But at least I'll be in a position to advise him on how best to take this thing apart. So my theory was correct. The corner is separated. Now with one strong guy on each end, this whole end piece could be picked up and removed. And in this case, when I came in here where these little screws are, the screws had rusted and kind of pulled back into the backer board, so I just used a screwdriver to pop it out so I could separate this corner. But I've learned what I was hoping to learn, and I'll call this a success.